Well, good morning, everybody. Get us started today. I want to show you a map from the Penn State E-wall, and what it's showing here is the last 24 hours of temperature change, and it really gives you the extent of the cold air that is behind this front. Now, we're going to be watching multiple shots at colder air coming into the south and southeast over this weekend. That's going to be a big story for how far to the south the frost line gets. I'm going to cover that in just a few seconds, but it's what this front did as it came through parts of Oklahoma and Texas last night. It's really quite important to have a look at here. So this radar animation we're watching, once it restarts here, you'll see the extent of the severe weather that came through parts of like the Red River Valley of the South down toward Dallas. And then we had a massive storm system that went through parts of southern Texas here that produced very, very large hail. On the northern side of this, we did get the back end of this producing more snow into parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, and heavy rains moved through the eastern Corn Belt down into parts of the Mid-South. And today, as this continues to move over the southeast, we do have the severe storm risk that'll stretch from parts of Louisiana into parts of the southeast, including Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and the panhandle of Florida. Before we look at that map, though, this is what the latest storm report data look like. 106 reports so far, most of them strong winds and hail. And down here in southern Texas, one report here over 4-inch diameter hail. So this was a very rough go of it in terms of hail production out of these supercells yesterday. Again, the risk for severe storms today kind of stretches from Louisiana over to the Panhandle, and we're going to keep an eye out on these storms by watching closely the radar this morning. Now, the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation are important to examine just to see where the atmosphere has been able to return moisture. Because what I'll be watching for with this upcoming jet stream pattern is how much more water is coming into the west. Can we return water back into the moisture back into the plains where we desperately need it? Do we continue to see flooding issues and heavy rains that stretch from the mid-south, southeast into the Midwest here? And is there more snow coming on the northern side of this? Because the latest drought monitor looks something like this. And what it shows us is that even though the drought has been reduced from about a max of 86% in late November down to about 55%, huge change in the west, but we've seen it just staying anchored here in the central United States, right here, mainly in the central and southern plains. And just to show you something here, let's go to the CPC's website and slide down. There it is. This is the latest. I want to show you that one. That's the latest seasonal outlook from now through June 30th on where there's expected to be a change in the drought situation. So you notice that it's persisting in the forecast for much of the western and southern plains, improvement in the northern plains, continued improvement for parts of California to the Great Basin. But this is now an area that I'm beginning to watch very carefully. We discussed it last night in the in-depth report that there is just the potential for ridging to set up here over the Pacific Northwest, getting into summer now. In the near term, this region is going to be quite cold, unfortunately, and there is better moisture coming into the Pacific Northwest in the near term. But this is a seasonal drought outlook I just wanted to draw your attention to. Now, before we come back to precip, I want to really hit back on what these temperatures are doing, because our next map shows the latest data on where there's the potential for frost in the next 7 days. So what I need you to see is that this is now getting pretty far to the south here, almost down to the Gulf Coast. And this, again, will be an area where we'll be flirting with, over the next 3 mornings, overnight low temperatures that could get down to that 32-degree mark. Now, the latest data from the National Digital Forecast Database is here. So this was this morning's low temperatures, and let's get into Saturday morning. So remember, this white line represents where the National Digital Forecast Database is forecasting a frost. This is Saturday morning into Sunday morning. So now we're through a big chunk of Texas, northern Louisiana, most of Mississippi, Alabama, and half of Georgia. As we go from Sunday into Monday morning, I think this will be the greatest extent of this colder air. So just notice some of these temperatures here could get down into that frost, even the freeze risk area. So we'll be watching to see on the all hazards weather map this weekend for the frost freeze watches, advisories, warnings to show up in this area. And again, in my daily report link that goes out, you can see these maps updated all the time. It's also on my website. Just a great place to go look. Now, after we get past Monday, moderation happens. That's Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday. And remember, these are overnight low temperatures. These are not highs. So very mild setup by the time we get to next Thursday. But as you'll see in a few minutes, these warm-ups through the end of March are fleeting. They come through and back down quickly by another shot at some colder air. But I'll show you in a few moments what we think April might look like. Okay, so let's now come back to precipitation. This is going to start off at 9 o'clock this morning. So very strong winds wrapping around this low that's anchored right now over the kind of Lake Huron. Snow on the northern side of it, snow back here in the southern Rockies. Here's the main front pressing through the southeast. And as we just play this, that front lines up along the Appalachian Mountains, eventually makes it over late this afternoon to this evening. You can see the stronger storms stretching through this area, but rain in the Carolinas, rain into parts of Virginia, and then rain falling on that recently added snow here in parts like the Hudson Valley and surrounding area. So that front slides through. There will be some lake effect snow on the back side of this through Saturday morning. Plenty of cold air coming in behind this, as we talked about with this high pressure cell. In fact, you can see down here in southern and western Texas some snow in this area. Now, as we go through Saturday and get out here to Sunday morning, there is another chance for more snow in the Sierra Nevada and more rain in the Central Valley of California with the next low that's just off the coast. You can also see the front coming through parts of Florida delivering some rainfall, and that's been an area that's been very dry for the last 3 to 4 months. But it's this high pressure cell that I'm most concerned about, this being on Sunday delivering that colder air pretty far to the south and setting up a very cold Monday morning. Now, let's just stretch this out and say, what do these next 10 days hold? And this map looks at precipitation anomalies. So drier conditions here and wetter there. The pattern's active. The jet is not blocked. It's really running across the country, which means we're going to see just chances for precipitation with pretty high frequency across big sections of the United States. Where are we drier? Possibly in the western plains. Could be a little bit of a drier stretch in the Mid-South. I'd love it here. A little drier in the Mid-Atlantic, but also in the Canadian Prairie, the Pacific Northwest, especially parts of Washington, and in places in the northern plains. So let's go right now to the high-res European model and kind of get an idea on this. So we've already seen through Sunday where the Arctic high is sitting. So here's that coastal low Sunday afternoon coming into the west. And again, this is a Sunday-Monday precipitation event from California over to the Great Basin and Four Corners states. That low will likely open up a large warm sector. Again, that will come out on Tuesday into Wednesday right here as a low, which means we're going to be watching next week for some strong to severe storms, possibly Tuesday, Wednesday. I think more likely on Wednesday right about here. And then that low comes out and runs right up to the upper Midwest. So you can see the potential for some more snow here next Wednesday and Thursday. And this is an area that's already got a tremendous amount of snow on the ground, so more could be added. Then I want you to keep an eye out here on the risk for those strong to severe storms. In fact, I think this whole corridor, as we go through the rest of March into April, will likely see better potential for more storm activity, especially as you get farther to the south. Maybe that's the better area to be circling there in terms of severe weather. But notice that the systems coming into the west just don't really relent. We have more moisture coming into California, the Great Basin, Four Corners states, and even some coming into the Pacific Northwest. Now, in last night's report, I included these maps. I want to show them to you again just to do a quick comparison. That is snow water equivalent as of March 16th. And in today's report, we really talk about the differences between this year and last year. But I just want to make a point. There's 2 to 10 inches of liquid here, a lot of liquid in the snow that just came into the Pacific Northwest, and the best snows we've seen throughout much of the western United States in a very long time, including up to 100 inches of liquid in the snow in California. And then here in the Great Basin, we have 130% of snowpack, which is the most we've seen in the last 10 years. What I'm concerned about is the next 10 days, because this is just looking at how much liquid would be in the precipitation over the next 10 days. And in the Sierra Nevada, look at the colors, not the numbers, but the colors, we're up here in this 4 to 5 inch range. Same thing for parts of the Colorado Basin. So a lot more moisture coming into the west, over the next 10 days. If we switch our view to more national, we can see the probability over the next 10 days of getting at least an inch of liquid. So again, still more precipitation coming down from much of the Corn Belt here, the central and eastern Corn Belt. Heavy rains in the Mid-South, down into the southeast. But this pattern isn't really slowing down in the near term. Okay, from here, let's look at the week 2 only. And once again, we see this corridor showing up wetter than average and parts of the west showing up wetter than average. Question is, does the jet dip far enough to the south to actually pull moisture back into Texas? It's a little drier signal there, but not completely bone dry, which is important to know. We could get some moisture coming into Texas out of this pattern. One last look at the temperatures before we look longer term and wrap this one up. This is the latest data from the ECMWF, and what we've seen as this forecast kind of continues to show is a lot of colder air over the next 5 days. But as we get out there into that day 5 through 10 time period, which stretches from out to the 26th of March, we now see more mild conditions across a broad sector of the country, while cold seems to stay very anchored in all forecast models from Alberta through Montana into the northern plains and then throughout the west. But as we go forward, the European model wants to deliver another shot at colder air. This might be related to its wanting to put the MJO back into phase 8. I'm not sure. But I cannot say with confidence that this colder air will actually be here going into the beginning of April. Seems pretty solid that it'll be here in the north and also in the west, but I don't know about this particular region. The GFS is not on board with this. It's got more of a mild signal for that time period. And as we talked about last night, the new CPC data is out for April, and this is the forecast from the Climate Prediction Center. So predicting, colder conditions retained throughout the west with a jet stream that likes to run up, into the midsection of the country. And that, again, is why I'm concerned about this whole area for the risk of strong to severe storms going into this month of April and beyond. And just want to show you the latest weeklies from the European model. This is their temperature and precipitation outlook for the month of April. And again, I'm not sure that it's going to be as cold as advertised in this area based upon some evidence with the movement of things in the tropics and a lack of big high latitude blocking. I just think the European may have just too cold of a bias here. Finally, I want to give you an update on South America. I'm going to give you this kind of an international view here, an international view. Note how wet it is north. So safrinha corn, the story continues to be very wet conditions in Mato Grosso. Drier in eastern and parts of southern and central Brazil. This is where we need to get harvest done. And there's still some signs of better storms coming into Argentina. It's way too late to really revive a crop, but important to see that. I also just want to point out, continues to see in the forecast here, wetter conditions for parts of Western Europe. This area had been in drought. Look how wet it's going to be in India and also in China. These were two areas we had some concerns about for drought developing this year, so we'll keep a close eye on that. And it's going very hot and quite dry across much of Australia, with the exception of parts of Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria here. Also quite wet in New Zealand over the next 10 days. So we continue to watch the atmosphere overturn as it approaches this spring time frame, and it's going to be important to monitor the severe weather threat and also just how the jet stream continues to set up as we begin to move toward more broader planting across much of the United States and around the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. So I'll watch it this weekend. Report back to you next week. Thanks.